Hey folks, how you doing today? This is Dan Powers at Champion. What I want to kind of look out or give a brief 10,000 foot overview is a phishing attack that you might see in any organization. And unfortunately, this year, these ransomware and phishing attacks have increased exponentially now that we have a large workforce working at home. So as we can see, you're going to have, and we'll just call them the bad actors, right? Whatever they happen to be, that they start hitting your email system, regardless of what that is. And they're sending out millions of emails trying to spam you and fool your users. So this becomes a numbers game. They're sending out literally millions upon hundreds of millions of emails, and they're hoping to get a very small percentage of people actually clicking on it, and ransomware is trying to take foothold. That's how they make their money. So it's a pure numbers game, and the numbers are not in your favor. Um, so what is your first line of defense of here, right? Well, depending on the email system you have in place, a lot of the mature, state-of-the-art email systems have some type of built-in things like Office 365 has some tools trying to filter some of this stuff out. And then we can get into an email proxy and secure gateway. Now, we have a bunch of vendors that we work with. They have various strengths that we enjoy, and I'm not here to talk about products today, but just more the idea that you do need some type of email proxy secure gateway to help filter your users. But when the first line of defense gets compromised or gets bypassed, because nothing's 100% great, what is the second line of defense that you can put in your organization? I think a lot of people miss this. So as we put the magnifying glass around our users, should give you a clue here, is we're really looking at user education, knowing where to spot a bad email, knowing what not to do, what is company-wide policy to do. And that can be simply done with end user training, whether that's in-house, whether it's something you developed, or something like KnowBe4, which I think does a really, really good job here. But again, if it gets past that level line of defense, then we have a third line of defense, of course, and I'm sure all of you know what that is. And that's going to be your endpoint protection, right? That's going to be those agents that exist on your boxes that are going to look for malware, look for attachments, maybe sandbox it, all of those cool things to try to help block ransomware. And if all these defenses worked every time, we wouldn't be seeing things in the news where ransomware has affected companies and literally have taken them down for weeks at a time. So unfortunately, it's not the last thing that you can do. And so far, whether you're internal to your perimeter or you're external and a remote worker, these three lines of defenses have you covered. But if you're a remote worker, here's where things can get a little different. And again, I'm doing this from a high level, but let's take a look. Is my next level of defense, if you will, can be your next gen firewall, or a tipping point solution or a IPS system. So if we look at how most ransomware works today, is that the initial drop of code, the initial thing is called like a dropper, where it puts itself on the box and your box is now compromised, but not necessarily fully infected with the ransomware. What it wants to do is talk to a command and control center somewhere out in the internet. And once it establishes that level of communication, the actual ransomware will actually get installed on your machine and then really infect your box. So a fourth line of defense, and this is where we get into a gray area, depending if you're remote, how your VPN is set up and all that good things, is you can rely somewhat on that perimeter or that next-gen firewall or an IPS system or IDS system like Trends Tipping Point, Palo Alto's next-generation firewalls, things of that nature. And if you could stop that outgoing command and control because it's a well-known IP address or a well-known domain name, and again, even some of that doesn't work all the time, but that is another line of defense for you to actually stop the ransomware infection from happening. But at this point, what I'd like to do is talk about what the ransomware kill chain is. And what we kind of just walk through is those first parts, that campaign, for an example. Then we have the infection, where actually got somebody kind of compromised. They got through your three lines of defenses. Then they staged themselves. This is where they actually downloaded the real ransomware. Now we have three more stages of this. Now we have an affected box, infected I should say, and it's going to start scanning your environment. We have a chance to see stuff at that point, maybe intervene, and then the actual encryption process. And when it gets to the last stage, it's too late because that's payday, right? So So the very first part is your defense, your preventative side, which most of us are doing well today. And then we have that EDR side. And again, we can get into, do I use Cylance? Do I use Windows Defender? Do I use Carbon Black or Trend? There's a myriad of these tools that do a really good job, but none of them will do it 100%. So if it gets past this stage, this is where your ability to disrupt it or stop the ransomware is highly unlikely at this point. Now we get into the scan and encryption phase. Now this is the one chance that you actually have some time to detect this and stop it and contain a ransomware outbreak. Why? Because we're going to see a lot of network authentication. We're going to see Active Directory logins. We're going to see directory enumerations that are probably not normal for a particular device as it's scanning the environment to see what it can affect, what it has rights to touch, and then when the actual encryption takes off. So this can be minutes to hours. It's minutes if, because ransomware actually works really fast, but if you have a large organization with a lot of data, it could take some hours. And they usually would kick this off on a Saturday or Friday or time periods when they know staff or monitoring is light, so that encryption process can actually encrypt as much as possible. So this is your one chance to deal with it. And of course, if they hit payday, if your stuff is encrypted, now we can't disrupt it. Now it's how do you deal with it? So this next part of this video, I did want to kind of walk through or take it from this next stage is where we have now an infected machine. It's got past your first lines of defenses, and now we're in that scan phase. And if we notice, what we're going to do here is the device is going to start doing a lot of network lookups. It's going to start seeing, hey, what can I affect? What can I touch? What do I have access to? This is that point that I talked about where you might be able to detect this. It's probably going to be anomalous that this particular device is doing so many network calls, and you might be able to detect the ransomware at this point and actually take action. The next thing, some of them, variants, might even infect another device on your network. Now I could have multiple devices beaconing, right, scanning my network, and you should see that because it's a lot of network activity. Once it kind of determines, and I mean the ransomware figures out what it's going, it's kind of going to slow down. You're not going to see that network activity. And then we're going to find an opportune time that we're actually going to do the encryption. And again, I mentioned that opportune time because that's exactly what they're looking for, is probably a Friday night or a shift change or over the weekend, so that they can kick off that encryption process because they know it will take some time and they want to get or compromise as many files as possible. So when it starts encrypting files, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see different machines starting to get infected, more data being affected everywhere, more of your service, your SIF servers, your SharePoints. This data will get infected. And again, this can take minutes to hours, and then we lost access to that data points. After that, really how you know at this point is, well, the ransomware is going to leave a note. It's actually going to delete itself so that it's harder to figure out what type of encryption took place. Now the question comes down to, if you find yourself at this point, what do you do now, right? Do you have a plan in place? So I want to redo this real quickly, and now we're going to look at something that we like. It's called Ransom Care by Bullwall. So again, we're starting with that encryption phase here at this point where we've already bypassed your 3 lines of defense, right? And we have an infected device out here. What happens as soon as this starts encrypting, the Bullwall system is actually going to contain this. There's no agents to be deployed, so we don't have to worry about that at all. And it's going to instantly find, after it encrypts about 5 to 6 files, it's going to know who did it, what device did it, and shut that device down and terminate that user's access, therefore containing that ransomware. So the rest of the environment is not infected, and now you have the device that was actually the problem. You know what files were infected, so hopefully with your backup systems, you can easily restore them. So this is something that interests you. Please let us know, because we do the demos for Bullwall Ransom Care, which in a real POV, we can actually release in a controlled manner some ransomware in a customer's environment where all of their defenses are up and ready for it. And we show them time and again how ransomware can still take effect, and where RC Ransom Care will actually contain the problem. So thank you for listening in. I know I took about 9 minutes of your time up. I hope you have a great day.